8 years ago, I encountered a body of work that confirmed, deepened, and expanded everything I thought I understood about astrology, plant medicine, and the cosmos. It felt like finding a missing piece that I did not even know I was looking for. And in a world that has been completely transformed since then, this work is more essential now than ever. Hello, and welcome to the Feed Your Wild podcast and to the Wildly Rooted Spirit channel. If you're watching over on YouTube, I'm Vanessa Rodriguez, clinically trained healer, Akashic channel, and guide for the light workers and healers and practitioners building the new earth from the inside out. And for over 15 years, I have walked this path between science and soul as a clinical nutritionist, an herbalist, and an astrology enthusiast, weaving together the wisdom of the plants, the body, and the cosmos into a living integrated healing practice. And I've always understood these as one language, the stars speaking through the body, the plants speaking through the stars, the body, as the meeting place where all of it lands, supporting healers and mystics as they reclaim their gifts and align with these rhythms is the work that I was born for. And right now, that work has never felt more urgent and more alive. I am pulling one of my all-time favorite conversations out of the archive today, recorded back in May of 2019. Yes, before COVID, pre-COVID era, before the great unraveling, before so many of us were cracked wide open to a deeper calling. And what strikes me every time I return to this conversation is that it was always ahead of its time. And this moment, everything that we are collectively moving through right now is exactly what it was made for. My guest is none other than Sajah Popham, founder of the School of Evolutionary Herbalism, one of my teachers, and someone whose work has been woven into mine for over 8 years. We met in Oregon, and what he carries is genuinely rare. Decades at the intersection of medical astrology and clinical herbalism and the spiritual dimensions of plant medicine, as well as alchemy, taught with a depth and rigor and brilliance that is hard to find anywhere else. And here is why this episode is dropping right now specifically. Sajah's Astro Herbalism program is open for enrollment this week only, and doors close Friday the 13th, March 13th. This is the most comprehensive integration of medical astrology and clinical herbalism that exists. And I have taken it myself. I am speaking from embodied experience and knowledge. I know exactly what is inside, and I am so lit up about this program that I have partnered up with the School of Evolutionary Herbalism and Sajah, and I've put together an exclusive bonus for everyone who enrolls through my link. And that bonus is the Cosmic Gifts and Voice Activation Bundle. Now, this is $876 worth of my own programming, my programs. Yours completely free if you decide to work with Sajah and do his program using my link. So all the details are waiting for you over at wildlyrooted.com/Astro Herbalism, one word. The link is in the show notes for you that need it. And so with that, now here is my conversation with Sajah Popham. I hope you enjoy.
In alchemy, they say the body is the most material aspect of the soul, and that the soul is just the most volatile aspect of the body. They're not separate. They're just different aspects of one thing, one unity, that we are an organic unity unto ourselves.
Sajah is the founder of Organic Unity and the School of Evolutionary Herbalism. And he's a student of the universal truths found within both ancient and modern herbal traditions from around the world. He's also the author of his new book, Evolutionary Herbalism: Science, Spirituality, and Medicine from the Heart of Nature. The focus of his work is on integrating ancient teachings for a new paradigm of plant medicine, one that is truly holistic in its honoring of the spirit, energetics, and body of both people and plants. His unique synthesis bridges herbalism not only east and west, but north and south, above and below, into a universal philosophy that encompasses indigenous wisdom, Ayurveda, Western alchemy and spagyrics, astrology, clinical herbalism, and modern pharmacology. Sajah, I am so excited to have you on. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
So it's funny because before I do a little pre-intro for each one of these podcasts. And so I give a little background about how I came to your work. But in the area where I'm at in Southern Oregon, there's a big herbalist community here, right? So every time I'm talking to somebody, your name would come up in the herbalism world, and someone would inevitably say, "That guy knows everything. He's an amazing teacher." So I think that's always an incredible testament when you have students years later talking about how incredible your teachings are. So we really feel honored to have you on.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I don't know about everything, but I still always feel like I got a lot more to learn.
Well, a lot of things. And we are going to jump into a lot of them because you talk about quite a bit in your new book, Evolutionary Herbalism, which I must say, I was telling you earlier, I have a copy. I tried to read through most of it. It's 500 pages for those of you who are interested. And literally not a single page is wasted, in my opinion. There's no fluff. So it's really incredible. And I have a ton of post-its. So I know it took a long time to write this book. I can only imagine. And I know that it took even longer to amass the vast array of experiences and teachings from these various wisdom schools and traditions that you weave so eloquently in this book. So let's start there at the beginning. Sajah, how did you come into this path, and what did it look like, you beginning to puzzle piece all of these things together for this book to be birthed?
Yeah. Well, for me, really begins in my childhood of that initial calling to want to be, the words I used then was a doctor, I really just wanted to help people. And I was really on the track to becoming a surgeon and really following that conventional allopathic track of medicine, because honestly, that's all I knew existed. I didn't know there was anything called alternative medicine, herbal medicine. I didn't know any of that existed. The plant path really started to open up to me, when I was in my later teenage years and really starting to kind of question the status quo and adopting more of an alternative lifestyle. I went vegetarian and kind of turned into a little bit of a hippie, and just kind of really I realized that conventional allopathic medicine didn't resonate with the values and my own personal connection to the earth. And ultimately for me, realizing that healing is so much more than fixing what's broken. Healing is so much more than the things that we experience in our body. And I think for me, I always consider myself more of a spiritual seeker before an herbalist. And for me, having that spiritual orientation was really, really important in my understanding of the world around me and my understanding of myself. And for me, it's like I realized that our spiritual development and our healing process are really two sides of the same leaf. That anytime we try to grow and evolve and develop spiritually, there's healing to be done, right? We come up against all that stuff that is holding us back, or all those conditioned patterns or the traumas and things that prevent us from really being authentically who we are and fulfilling our purpose and path in life. And And at the same time, whenever we heal, there is a certain degree of growth and development that we undertake when we heal ourselves. And so that was really instrumental in my own path. And for me, that really led me to plant medicine and medicinal plants and healing. And for me, that led me to, I was really on track to going to conventional medical school, and then pretty soon was like, well, this isn't really feeling quite right. And the plants really opened up to me. And so I ended up going to university at Bastyr University up in Washington State in the herbal sciences program. And as the name implies, it's herbal science. So really scientifically oriented perspective of plants, right? Botany, chemistry, human anatomy, biochem, all that understanding of how a medicinal plant interfaces with the human organism on a scientific level, which is fascinating. And I absolutely love that orientation. But at the same time, I had this real spiritual take on plants and healing. And I was sitting with plants in my secret classroom in the forest outside of Bastyr, and felt this split between my heart and my mind, my spirit and my science, and I think that's something that a lot of people in the world experience, right? Is how do we unite science and spirituality? How do we have, in alchemical terminology, the above and the below come together and meet in the middle? And that was a lot of my challenge as an herbalist of, thinking in terms of alkaloids and sesquiterpene lactones and iridoids and how they affect human biochemistry, to, learning about plants from the plants themselves and how plants can heal our childhood trauma and how plants can heal our minds and our hearts, and on this kind of deeper, more soul level. And so that really led me to seek out traditions of plant medicine and healing that see things from a balanced perspective. They really honor the physical side and the spiritual side. And over time studying these traditions, I really saw that really most of them are saying the same things, just in different languages, slightly different orientations based on their culture, their ecosystem, their language. But I found that, there's really universal truths in the natural world. There's universal truths in the healing process. There's universal truths of what a plant is and how a plant heals, that these herbal traditions all over the world throughout time have seen that. And my goal is to bring those together in a way that has a model of plant medicine where we can equally acknowledge and honor our bodies, the health of our bodies and our organ systems and our tissues, and at the same time see its connection to the importance of our spirituality and the evolution of our soul. And that ultimately is what I call evolutionary herbalism.
Yeah, I can only imagine like all of these doors starting to open up as you go deeper, and your book encompasses so many different perspectives and traditions: Ayurveda, alchemy, some Chinese medicine, astrology, in addition to the clinical herbalism. So how did that look when you started to piece it together? I feel like you definitely have a gift of being able to speak these different languages, because not everybody can, really go in, comprehend, and then take it and translate it and integrate it with everything else that you've encompassed. So, how did you begin to weave those together in this new way with evolutionary herbalism?
Yeah, I think for me the main thing is, well, it's interesting. It kind of makes me think about the educational system in a way, which I don't mean to digress, but it's like we're taught in our culture how to think really, really well, but we're not really taught to intuit or to feel, or, it's like we're taught in this very intellectually dominant, like memorize things. Like you got to memorize all this information so that you can put it on the test and get the right answer, and then you walk out of the lecture hall and you forget half of what you memorized, right? And I think it's really interesting that in the English language we have this phrase, learn it by heart. And it makes me think of like, what's the difference between learning something by heart versus memorizing it? And I would say that when we learn something by heart, it's because there's a very tactile, experiential dynamic to it. It becomes a way of seeing things, not just something that lives in the ethers of our mind. And so for me, as I approach these different, quote unquote, different herbal traditions and cultures, I was really seeing them through the lens of nature, and seeing how all of these cultures and people had a very different way of seeing the world around them than we do in our modern world. And that was less intellectual, and it was more experiential. It was more direct. It was more, as I talk about in the book, it was from the heart. They acquired what I refer to as gnosis cardiaca, the knowledge and understanding that can only be obtained through seeing the world through the heart as an organ of perception. And in that way, they all saw the same patterns, right? They all were students of nature. They all experienced the same earth, the same water, the same air, the same fire, the same sun, the same moon, the same stars, just from their own slightly different perspective. And so as I explored these traditions, I was really interested in the concept of what in the Western Hermetic traditions is oftentimes referred to as the perennial philosophy, the evergreen truth, not a temporal fact, but something that lives on, something that's inscribed in the heart of life itself. And what are those truths, and how are those truths of nature applied to these different models of healing? And I think for me, that's how approaching these perspectives and traditions, how I was able to kind of integrate them, because I wasn't just seeing the surface level, I was seeing how they were tapping into this universal pattern in nature that is actually very well encapsulated very well in the Western alchemical tradition, which is really what started to bring it all together for me, because they say alchemy is the universal science, the universal medicine, and the universal spirituality. And through understanding the cosmology, the pattern of nature as expressed by that tradition, you can really see the interconnections amongst these various schools of thought.
Totally. And I feel like your book and what you're speaking to, it's so timely in that my sense just with talking to people, reading the media, like just what's happening in the media, and so much going on with chronic illness and the increase of just chronic disease and degenerative diseases in general, that there's almost like this swing of the pendulum kind of turning. And a lot of people are disillusioned with maybe what the types of treatments or what information that's available through the more Western conventional allopathic methods. And a lot more people that I'm finding are really thirsty for this truth that you're speaking about, and have this sense that it's out there, but they can't quite put their finger on it, and they can't put words to it. But I think that there's this thirst and desire. And so I feel like everything you write about and with your work is very timely in that way. And in your book, you cover 5 different parts, and I want to kind of speak to the 5 pillars of evolutionary herbalism, if you wouldn't mind walking us through those.
Yeah. I mean, it all begins, like I was saying, with that connection to nature, and to kind of, just to briefly acknowledge something you were talking about there of, the state, kind of the state of the world, and to me, it's like I see that. And I think a lot of the problems that we're facing as a culture and as individuals, a lot of that really comes down to, I think, our disconnection from nature, the illusion that we carry, that we think that the human organism is separate from nature. And no matter how much we pave over the earth, it's still there and we're a part of it. But when we see ourselves as separate from it, then we can start to get sick on a lot of different levels, physical levels, but also spiritual, psychologically sick too. And so to me, the beginning of what I think of as the plant path, or the path of the evolutionary herbalist, it really begins with our own connection to nature. that first pillar, the light of nature, is a concept that goes back to Paracelsus. And he talks about, the intelligence of the natural world and the importance for us to realize that A, we're a part of that, and B, we have, as a part of that, we have this innate capacity to be in communication with the intelligent beings that we inhabit this planet with, not just other humans. So that's really that core pillar, the light of nature. And then it moves into a second pillar, is something I refer to as energetic architecture, that as we follow the light of nature, as we see the intelligence etched into the natural world, as we attune ourselves to the cycles and rhythms and patterns of the earth and the cosmos, that we see there's an underlying order. We see that there's a pattern to the way nature functions, and these patterns influence all of life. And I generally summarize them into three primary energetic patterns that we really see at the basis of herbal medical traditions, but also cosmologies, mythologies, pantheons, science. What I generally refer to as the three principles, the five elements, and the seven planets. And so we go into those in quite a bit of detail in their reflections throughout herbal and medical and spiritual traditions across the world, which kind of leads into that third pillar, which is universal herbalism, which is, as we follow the light of nature and perceive the energetic architecture of life itself, that we're able to see how these different herbal traditions were also following the light of nature and perceiving energetic architecture. And that was the basis of how they created, or not even created, but they perceived their medical art. And so universal herbalism is really understanding how those patterns, the sevenfold pattern, the fivefold pattern, and the threefold pattern, are reflected in herbal traditions, from Ayurveda to Chinese medicine to Unani Tib, or the Middle Eastern tradition, Greek medicine, various North American traditions of herbalism, physiomedicalism, eclecticism, homeopathy. All these different traditions really can be integrated in a really unique and dynamic way, along with some what might be considered more esoteric traditions in the West, being medical astrology and the alchemical lineage from Europe. And so that's really what universal herbalism is that integration amongst traditions, because they were all seeing the same thing, but from their own different perspective points. So they all have a slightly different take. And when we bring them all together, it's like we have kind of like this 360-degree understanding of that singular point of focus. And so the fourth pillar moves into transformational medicine, which is really the result of universalizing our herbalism, right? That we can have a model of plant medicine that equally heals the body, the mind, and the heart, as well as the soul. And that was one thing that always really inspired me and also confused me was, like we would see in herbalism, like, okay, over here you have people that are very clinical and very maybe scientific and really focused on healing physical disease and symptoms and things like that. And then over here you'd have maybe people that are having more of a spiritual orientation. They're working more through emotional stuff and trauma and spiritual things with plants, and and they're using totally different medicines. Clinicians are using tinctures and capsules and powders and teas, and maybe more on the other side they're using things like flower essences or homeopathics or plant spirit healing and things like that. And it always really bugged me, because I was like, oh, they both kind of argue with each other sometimes. The scientific people are like, well, that's all super woo-woo and that's not real. And and all the other people are like, well, you're too scientific and reductionistic. Like, you're forgetting the fact that we have a soul and it needs healing too. And I'm kind of sitting there and I'm like, you both are talking about the same thing. It's just from a different side of the equation. It's like in alchemy, they say the body is the most material aspect of the soul, and that the soul is just the most volatile aspect of the body. They're not separate. They're just different aspects of one thing, one unity, that we are an organic unity unto ourself. And so that's really, to me, the transformational medicine, is that we want to use the whole plant to heal the whole person, chemically, energetically, and spiritually. And that practice involves having actual medicines, like the actual herbal medicines that we administer to a person as a practitioner, is going to embody the wholeness of that plant. And that is what the entire art of spagyrics, or plant-based alchemy, is all about, is how to have an actual herbal extract that contains all the chemistry of the herb, but also has the subtle energetics and spiritual properties of the plant as well. So that really is the crux of transformational medicine. And the fifth pillar is know thyself. We say that we can't expect to heal and transform the life of another with the power of a medicinal plant until we ourselves have been healed and transformed by the power of a medicinal plant. That we have to go through the level of healing that we can offer to another is equivalent to the level of healing that we've gone into within ourselves. And so to me, this final pillar is really the foundation of all of them. And as an herbalist, as a healer, that we have to know thyself. We have to heal thyself. And I think that really speaks to our integrity as healers, and speaks to the necessity for us to do our own internal work, so that we can have the compassion and the courage and the strength and the kindness that is required to really be of service to another person in a healing context. So that's what I see those 5 as kind of being the foundations of this practice that I refer to as evolutionary herbalism.
What I love about this too is that it feels almost circular or spiralic, in that when you speak about knowing thyself, it kind of comes back to the light of nature and that remembrance that we are nature, and then, starting all over again. Just like I feel any type of journey, it's, you think that you made it, through the hoops, and then you're like, oh, wait, there's more to life.
Absolutely. Well, and in everything that I strive to create, everything that I create is built off of that model of energetic architecture, or all of my teachings and everything that I do is strive to not be linear, right? So yes, that 5th pillar loops back around into the light of nature, and the cycle repeats, because that's the way nature functions. And I think that's, if as human beings we can learn to imitate nature and build and create based off of that pattern of nature, it's in accordance with the order of things. And I think it's when we can kind of veer away from that we start backing ourselves up into a corner, like we're seeing in the modern world right now.
Totally. And I think we do that in so many ways. And one of the ways that you spoke to briefly is really dogma, kind of like focusing in and having this tunnel vision with regards to whether it's a particular tradition or method of medicine or healing, whatever. But I feel like the pillars of evolutionary herbalism that you just described, there isn't any room for dogma. Like there's no way that dogma could exist through this framework.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's striving to be inclusive. Never in the history of the world, but since I'm focused on plant medicine, we can say the history of herbal medicine, right? Has an herbalist ever had the level of information available to us, like at the tips of our fingers, right? I mean, the 3 doshas of Ayurveda is like there's like very few herbalists have not heard of that, it's like, but 100 years ago that no one was aware of these things, that we can study, people can go and get a degree and become an acupuncturist. Like that's amazing. The level of information that is accessible to us is astounding and really overwhelming for most people. And I think the more that we can create, and that's been a lot of my goal with my work, is like, hey, let's like here's a system that really shows how these all work together and really are reaching towards the same goal, and can have an integrative model. So, we don't end up in these, well, it's not like this, it's like that. And it's not like that, it's like this. And it's like, well, come on, you're saying the same thing. You're just caught up on the words, which I think is what dogma can be. It's like this real, like, well, no, it's called that. No, it's called this. And it's like, well, if you really step back and look at it, y'all are saying the same thing, just a different word, So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a part in the chapter on transformational medicine where you speak to the practice of evolutionary herbalism as really supporting the unfolding of who we truly are, like this unveiling process. And there's a quote there I want to read because I really love it. An inner forest begins to grow as we become a part of the earth again, cracking through the concrete shell of our worldly conditioned self. And I think that's so powerful because that's something that a lot of people have been reaching out to me with regards to the podcast and work is the conditionings that we carry, like these patterns and these beliefs that it feels almost really hard to let go of or to break through. So I'd love for you to speak to how plants can really support us through this process, through the lens of transformational medicine.
Yeah. Well, this is an area that I'm really passionate about, because a lot of it is just like about my own healing journey too, and I think I feel really blessed and lucky that I realized at what feels like to me a pretty young age, like late teenage years, early 20s of like, when I was really engaging on my spiritual path, it was like, whoa, like there's all this stuff in my mind and these beliefs about myself and what's right and what's wrong and what's good and what's bad and who you're supposed to be and who you're not supposed to be, and all these things that I realized that weren't really true to me. It was like, oh, that was something that, my teacher said, or this is something that the media told me, or this is something, it's like there's so many ways that our culture feeds us falsities, really. Conditioning our minds and our hearts to think and feel certain ways that aren't in accordance with the true self that is inside of us, the essence of who we are, or what I like to think of as our true nature, right? That we have an inner world and an inner earth, and that inner earth sometimes gets that concrete shell of conditionings poured on top of it, and we forget who we are. And so to me, the process of working with plants in this transformational context is that they have this ability to reclaim parts of our own nature. It reminds me of a really great quote from Stephen Herod Buhner, and he's one of the modern plant geniuses of our time. And he says, I quote this one a lot because it's just I can't say it better than this. He says, "We're all born into this world with a hole inside of us, and only something from the natural world can fill it. And when we find that thing, we remember who we are." And that quote to me really speaks of the wounding that we all carry, the traumas that we carry, the holes that we have inside of us. And that this process of working with plants, especially as herbalists, a lot of the times herbalists are drawn to certain remedies, right? There's certain plants that, stand up in the forest and call their name. And as they deepen their relationship to that plant, it changes them. It's a question that I've asked traveling around the country, teaching a lot of different conferences and workshops and seminars and things like that. And a room full of herbalists to say, how many of you feel like since you began your plant path to now, you're a different person, that through your relationship with the plants and through your work with the plants, that something fundamental has changed inside of you, that you feel more close to the truth of who you are, and that you feel like you've been transformed? And I would say 99% of the time, everyone raises their hand. And to me, that's a really curious thing, right? It's like, let's think about this for a minute, you know? It's like, okay, who you were and who you are now is radically different because of the plants. And who you are now is you feel more closely connected to truth, like external truth and internal truth, like who you really are. And it's like, let's look at that healing process that happens. And why can't we share that level of healing with the people we serve? That's not, that experience isn't just reserved for herbalists, but we can provide that level of healing for the people that sit in front of us and ask for help. And so that really has been the focus of when I talk about transformational medicine, is that process of reclaiming our nature, our true nature. And oftentimes that takes the form of sometimes looking at the parts of ourself that we spend a lot of energy in our lives trying to avoid, you know, those traumas that we've experienced throughout our childhood, accidents, things that have deeply affected us in what oftentimes we're in the middle of it in a negative way, you know. But as we come to terms with the things that have happened to us and shift our perception of them, and that's one of the ways I find the plants can really help, is they can help to kind of open up those experiences, you know, not in a way of like going back to just relive something that happened traumatically, but to revision it, to see it in a new way, so that we can see it from a place of healing, we can see it from a place of teaching, as opposed to from a place of reactivity and from a place of blame or judgment, criticism, things like that. And one of the ways that I've primarily have worked with it in this way, kind of in this model, is through medical astrology, which is a really powerful tool in the way that it enables us to translate physiological, psychological, and spiritual patterns within a person's life. And so sometimes people have experienced certain traumatic events that are, well, they're all in essence archetypal. They relate to these archetypal forces that are really the stuff of myth, right? But that are really clearly encapsulated in the astrological model. And so oftentimes we can look into someone's life and see what are those archetypes that are giving them a hard time, you know, maybe really intense relational problems with Venus, or maybe violence and things like that, Mars, and all different ways that we can become traumatized, and looking at what's that main archetype that's at play through the lens of astrology. And then we can find herbs that also correlate to those archetypal forces and prepare that plant according to the principles of alchemy that are concentrating not only the chemistry, energetics, and spirit of the plant, but also concentrating that archetypal force into the medicine. So then when someone ingests that medicine, that plant, it works as like a bridge between the microcosm of the person to the archetype that dwells in the macrocosm. And through that, the alchemically prepared medicines start to adjust our balance. They adjust the way that we embody and express these archetypes in our life, and transforming it from maybe the not so positive side of things into the more virtuous expression of those archetypes, the healthier expression of those archetypes, taking the same energy, right? It's the same energy. You just transform it from kind of like I said, like a not so healthy expression to a healthier expression. And that's really what alchemy is all about on a chemical level and on a spiritual level, right? That we're turning poison into the medicine. We're turning lead into gold. So that's just a little bit on kind of the way I see that process of transformational medicine.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I really appreciate that you have, pretty incredible primers on medical astrology and the alchemical perspective, and all of these to really demonstrate how these are interconnected, but also like the language of metaphor and symbolism and archetypes, because it really draws us, at least it does for me, draws us back into that more intuitive mind, the heart space, and a different way of perceiving and hearing, even if we can't, fully with our mind recognize what might be going on. But it's like all of these ahas start to click, and we can then see these patterns. So what you were speaking to, and you write about this in your book, is tending to the inner cosmos. And I'm curious because I know there's some listening that are like, this is awesome, I want to be able to do this. Would you be able to give maybe an example and root this information with like a case study or an example of what does it look like to tend to the inner cosmos in the way that we were talking about through transformational medicine?
Yeah. So I think a case study is a really good way to kind of share how that all works, because that's the thing about this work, right? Is that it can seem like it's flying at about 10,000 feet, and it's kind of like it's from a lot of people's perspective, it's like, whoa, it can get a little bit out there, but it is actually a very tangible, grounded practice, right? And it really brings the above and the below together in that way. The way the process works, the way I see it with evolutionary herbalism is that, we have this pattern of energetic architecture, 7 planets, 5 elements, and 3 principles. And those are within each and every thing, people and plants and everything else. So the goal for the evolutionary herbalist is to understand our materia medica, our herbal remedies, and their relationship to a planet, an element, and a principle. And when working with a person, we want to look at the person, their body, their constitution, their symptoms, their tissue states, their organs that are imbalanced, their mind, their heart, maybe some of the lessons that they seem like they need to learn in their life in order to further their development. We look at all those aspects of a person and kind of translate that into what is the energetic architecture of this person, or what are the archetypes that are most strongly influencing them. And then what we strive to do is match the pattern in the plant to the pattern in the person that's going to retune those archetypes. So, one of my favorite case studies that I talk about in the book there, and I actually there's a lot of cases similar to this, because I've used this plant for similar situations. But I had a client, and she came with a primary complaint of urinary tract infections. She got UTIs pretty consistently ever since her late teenage years. And so we were really wanting to work with that, try to figure out what was going on there. And upon deeper intake and interview, turns out that she had been in a pretty bad relationship for quite some time. It repeatedly got in bad relationships. There's men that didn't treat her well. She had some abuse in her past and was currently in a pretty abusive emotionally and physically relationship. And it was pretty bad. And so and she had a very classic, what in Ayurvedic terminology we might refer to as a vata constitution, very thin and delicate, and what we might refer to as kind of a deer-like appearance, prominent joints, kind of wider eyes, and soft-spoken and gentle, really sweet disposition, but a bit of a nervous disposition as well. And the symptoms in her body of like really burning, hot, irritable, burning type pain in the urinary tract, a lot of inflammation, a lot of tension. She was really not in a very good way. And so from an archetypal standpoint, we see that there's a primary astral influence here of the planet Venus, which relates to the kidneys and the urinary tract. Venus also relates to relationships. And this person had been in kind of chronic relational problems for a long time. Venus also governs the reproductive system as well. And there had been some trauma there in her past. And that was actually the onset of the chronic UTIs. And so looking at that, I was like, okay, Venus is like a very strong ruler here in this situation. And then looking at it kind of from an elemental perspective, we really see that water element was really imbalanced there in the way it was her urinary tract. She had a lot of lymphatic swelling as well in the inguinal lymph nodes from the infection. So that's kind of lymphatics. This is like the inner ocean. And obviously urinary tract relates to the water element. And as I mentioned, she kind of had this very nervous, thin disposition, or what in Ayurveda would refer to as a Vata constitution, which relates to the Mercury principle in alchemy. So that's what I'd say her energetic architecture, right, was like Venus, water, Mercury. And so then from there, that helped me to decipher what remedy would be best suitable for her, which was the plant cleavers, or Gallium aperine. And cleavers is a really amazing remedy in the way that it's a very potent diuretic, very good for cleansing fluids from the tissues and eliminating them through the kidneys and urinary tracts. Use it to flush the urinary tract a lot. It's also a great lymphagogue, so it helps to drain congestion in the lymphatic system. So it's pretty perfect there in the way that it will flush out the urinary tract, cleanse the lymph. It's basically, hitting the primary complaints there. Very cooling, soothing, and acutely moistening in the urinary tract, which is beneficial for the heat and irritation and dryness that she was experiencing. So from an herbal energetic standpoint, it matched very well there. But really, the way to me that plant was working was through its embodiment of Venus. So we really see Venus moving through cleavers in the way that it grows. It grows in relationship with other plants and kind of clusters, and it's very thin and delicate like Vata, and very moist and lush like water. And the way that I've come to understand this remedy is that it actually really works for relational issues, specifically in regards to people with attachment issues. For anyone that knows cleavers, it is very sticky, right? It's like you walk by cleavers and it clings to your pants and it kind of comes along for a ride. And the only way it can really grow is through its relationship to other plants in its environment. And so it has this signature of relationship. And it has the signature of kind of clinging and attaching and holding on, and it gets really tangled, right? And that's really the cleaver's person. Is like the cleaver's person, they get in these relationships with people for not really the right reasons. Like maybe they see them suffering, or maybe they want to help them. They want to be their healer, but it's like they want to help them. It's not coming from a place of like love. And so it's not a reciprocal, healthy relational dynamic as far as intimate partnership goes, from my perspective. And so what ends up happening is these people oftentimes get very enmeshed and entangled in these very unhealthy relational patterns. And so what we see with the cleavers is that it detangles that, right? It helps people release these attachments. It helps people kind of detangle themselves from these very unhealthy relational dynamics. Like a lot. I've given this remedy to a lot of people, and it's kind of like almost ridiculous how well it works. Sometimes the relationship clears up, and maybe both parties realize where they're falling short, and they heal and get better, and things can move on. And sometimes, more often than not, there's a separation and a detachment that happens in that relationship. And that was the case with this client. And she started taking a couple drops of a spagyric essence of cleavers, and very quickly the UTI cleared. Very quickly, the lymphatic swelling went down. Actually, her nervous disposition started to correct, so she felt less nervous. And this was actually before I learned that cleavers did have a bit of an affinity for the nervous system. And then basically she kind of was able to step outside of herself and look at her situation from an outside perspective, and kind of realized how messed up it was, and realized how she'd been repeating this pattern over and over and over again. And it was really unhealthy for her. And so she made the resolve to get out of that relationship, and rather than jumping right into another one, to take that time to be with herself, to come to connect with her own self, and from there have clarity about what kind of person it is that she would want to be with in a deeper partnership. And that's pretty much exactly what happened for her. And she hasn't had chronic UTIs ever since then, recurring UTIs ever since then. And she's in a really good, healthy partnership with someone that really appreciates her and is kind to her and treats her really well. And so the way that from this orientation of herbal medicine, it's yes, the cleavers was healing her physiologically, psychologically, helping to clear this pattern that she was repeating, this unhealthy repetitive pattern. But through the lens of alchemy and medical astrology, we're seeing that it was actually that cleavers was healing her relationship to this archetype of Venus, right? That she was living her life, and the way that she was expressing and embodying the archetype of Venus, which is all about our relationships, right? It's all about how we relate to the other, whatever that quote other might be. And in that sense, Venus really initiates us through love and through connection and through our relationships. And so she wasn't really embodying this archetype of Venus in a healthy way. And so cleavers comes in, this living, healing intelligence of the earth comes into her life and retunes that connection, retunes that archetypal force within her own, to use the alchemical term, astral body. It's basically the equivalent to what in Chinese medicine we would call meridians or points, or in Ayurveda we would refer to the nadis, right? These energetic channels in our system. In the West, they refer to that as the astral body. And in a similar way, there's 12 meridians in Chinese medicine. There's 12 signs of the zodiac and things like that in the astrological model. So cleavers enters her life and retunes that Venusian archetype to express itself in a healthier, more virtuous manner. And in that way, it brought healing into her life that really transformed her life in a beautiful, positive way. So that's a lot of different stories like that. But that one, I love telling cleavers stories because they're always really dramatic in the way that I think a lot of people experience patterns like that and difficulties in relationship, and can kind of feel how things can get really tangled up. And just seen that plant help a lot of people in that way.
Well, I think this is also such a beautiful example because I have seen so many people with very similar experiences and feeling trapped within that pattern, and the power of plants to really support us in breaking through those patterns is just like astonishing every time it happens. But it's also like, why are we surprised? Right? At a certain point, the power of those. But one thing that you speak to in the book, and I'm hearing this as you're speaking about this case study, is the difference between a hope herbalist and a strategic holistic herbalist. And even the use of one plant and how powerful using one plant, if it's matching so well for the person, how powerful that can really be.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think, there's different levels of herbalists out there, right? I mean, we have, and I think unfortunately, it's a little more rampant these days, but just allopathic herbalists, and I don't say it from a judgmental or overly critical orientation. To me, using herbs allopathically is most definitely a step in the right direction in a lot of situations. But I think we can oftentimes do better, right? And allopathic herbalism is basically kind of using an herb like a drug, not in more of the orientation, right? It's the use this herb for that symptom mindset. Whereas a holistic herbalist isn't just using herbs for symptoms, they're using herbs for the whole person, right? They're really looking at not just the symptom, but what's the cause of the symptom, right? And let's address that root cause of the symptom. And whether that's an herb or maybe it's a dietary thing or it's a lifestyle thing, right? There's lots of different, to me, a holistic herbalist doesn't just use herbs for their healing, right? They look at the wholeness of someone's life, right? And so they're going to really make those bigger picture kind of suggestions on how they can live every day in a healthier way. And then to me, that there's that kind of other level too of the what I think of as the evolutionary herbalist, which is someone that doesn't just give the herb for the symptom and doesn't just treat the whole person, but they're really looking at that spiritual side too, and they're looking at the archetypal side too, like I was expressing there, and and I think there's a time for everything. Sometimes sometimes you have to be an allopathic herbalist, right, to save a life, right? I mean, the ultimate goal is that we are relieving suffering, that we are helping people, and we're healing them. And sometimes that means, oh, you have like an infection right there. Well, maybe we should treat that right now because that's what's happening right now. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like if someone's bleeding out, you don't want to be like, well, let's talk about your family traumas. It's like, no, like you give them some yarrow because it treats that, right? So, I always I think sometimes I get a little misunderstood when I talk about allopathic herbalism, because I in no way ever want to come off as being judgmental or overly critical or saying that it's bad, because it has its place. It's just not the only way that we can practice herbal medicine. And yeah, the whole dynamic of single plants versus formulation is a dynamic that goes back a really long time, especially in Western herbalism. Different schools of thought, the simplers versus the formulators, and strong arguments on either side of the equation. Well, you should only give one remedy for all these great reasons, and you should really formulate because of all these great reasons. And I don't know, I always feel like I'm kind of the weird guy that's like the third dude over here that's hearing this argument and being like, you're both right, damn it.
Yeah.
And so formulation, simples, it's all good. It's like, if you can find that one plant that matches that person on all those levels, that to me, that's a really powerful medicine for that person. And I would say when you can find those remedies, that those are the plants that mirror an essential part of who we are, right? They help us to heal because they help us to become more whole, because they fill that hole inside of us that only something from the natural world can fill. And sometimes we can find that individual remedy, and that's a really great thing. And sometimes it's hard to find that singular remedy that will help someone. And that's where formulation comes in, and different approaches to combining herbs in strategic ways that can really address every level of what that person needs to get the healing. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, there is so much more I want to get into, and we're already at the hour, but I wanted to give folks a chance who are really excited about this. They have, or they're going to get your book, and they're starting to weave through, the comprehensive picture of herbalism and medicine that you've put together. But they might also feel overwhelmed if, let's say, they're very new to herbalism in general, or maybe new to astrology or Ayurveda. So how do you recommend people start to work with your book, and what are some of the first steps that one can take?
Yeah, well, I mean, I definitely think reading the book is a good place to start, and probably rereading it a few times over, because the book is it's a little bit like a puzzle, actually. A kind of it's a non-linear book. You can read it linearly, but there's a lot of different approaches to integrating the information in there. There's just, I always encourage people to pay attention to those plants that really stand up in the forest and call your name, those remedies that really call to you in some way, whether they keep seeing them in your front porch, or you keep seeing them, every time you open a book and you see that plant, or there's a way the light shines on it when you're walking through the forest one day and it kind of catches your breath. And just paying attention to what plants really speak to you in that way. I always encourage people, that's the beginning of the plant path. It's not reading a book. It's not finding a local class or teacher. It starts with a calling. And it starts with a calling that's not a thought in your mind, but it's a feeling in your heart. It's something that you feel. It's a pulse from the heart of nature that touches your own heart, and it pulls you from the world back into the earth. And as you start to walk that pathway, certain plants make themselves known to you. And those are the plants that will reclaim those parts of you and bring your nature back together so that you can heal yourself and know thyself. And that to me is really the beginning of this work.
I love it, Sajah. I think that's a perfect place to end, except that we always ask this one question to everybody who comes on, and I'm not going to let you get away without answering it. And that is, what is feeding your wild right now, whether body, mind, soul, or all of the above?
Well, I think to me, it's just there's always something that is so incredible in watching the turning of the seasons. It's I've been living in Southern Oregon for a number of years, and I'm back in Washington now, where I was born. And there's something about just witnessing this spring season right now, watching the growth of the plants and just the movement of the animals and the way that the weather changes and moves, and how I feel that change in the season externally reflect into my own internal seasonal shifts, and just the profundity of that, of how that basic pattern of how nature changes really affects us internally. And the more that I can be aware of those external and internal seasonal shifts and adjust my diet and my lifestyle and how I move throughout my day, the more in tune with nature I am. And I feel like that is really what incorporating the wild into our life is, right? Is really that connection with nature and following it as best as we can.
Oh, I totally agree. And I think it's very sweet that you get to witness that now, kind of being back in your home state after being away. So that's always something that I think stirs up lots of memories and sweet emotions whenever that I get to experience that too. So
totally.
And Sajah, I know people are going to want to find out more, get in on your school and all the things. So where can people find you?
Yeah, people can find us at evolutionaryherbalism.com. And we've got lots of free stuff there on the blog and all sorts of stuff over there.
Lots of stuff. Great. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you, Sajah. This was amazing.
A real honor to be part of the show. Thank you.
Hey there, I made something for you. One of the biggest challenges that I hear from people is that they are feeling stuck when it comes to their health. You're a smart, capable, and creative change maker, right? And you know what you should be doing for your health. So what gives? Well, it's not about willpower. And I wanted to create something that would help you to unlearn the things that are keeping you stuck so that you can get out of your own way and master the mindset of health. That's why I created Wildly Unstuck, where you'll learn the top 5 things that I have found to sabotage your health goals and what to do about them. You'll learn what it really takes to become committed and unstoppable when it comes to your health goals, and find the clarity you've been looking for so you know exactly what to do to get back into alignment. And I made it totally free. So if this is something that you want to dive into and create a vision and soul goals for your health and your life and bring your gifts to the world, because we know that we need it, then I invite you to join us in Wildly Unstuck. You can find that at wildlyrooted.com/unstuck. I'll see you on the other side.